the creation of the world in the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. What we're talking about here with these scriptures is general revelation, and there's a phrase in Latin that theologians use, creatio ex nihilo, creation out of nothing. When God spoke, it was. Just like that. Now, just changing topics here, and I wish, is anything happening back there? We're up and running. Let's see if I can get my handy dandy gadget to come on here. Thanks, Timmy and helper. Is it MJ? Sorry. How many of you had your cup of coffee this morning? Yeah, I like to have a cup of coffee, and I like to have cream and cinnamon in it. Have you ever just sat there in the morning and only me, some of you are instantly awake in the morning, like my wife. I'm just like, it takes me a while to get going. Sit there and I'll look at my cup of coffee and pour cream in it. If you don't stir it, what happens? What's that? Take a look at that. If you stop pouring, it just swirls in there, right? What's happening? Well, this is a bit of an illustration of something I'm going to be talking about. The laws of thermodynamics at work here. Is that right, Tim and Mark? We have the coffee is hot and the cream or milk is cold. And so there's something happening. There's an interchange of temperature. And what happens when heat and cold, or hot and cold, mix? What happens to the temperature? Does it get hotter? No. Hot always tends to go cold, right? Left alone. Unless there's a heat source to heat it up, it'll always, and that cream or milk, even if you don't stir it, you watch it for a while, yeah, a lot of it will go to the bottom, but eventually, if you just leave it alone, it'll just diffuse or it'll mix into the whole thing. And it all cools down to a common temperature. But it'll be cooler than what it was before. The laws of thermodynamics. If you would put coffee in a thermos, insulated thermos, it is approximate to an isolated system where no energy leaves, so no heat, and no steam can leave the thermos, and no heat is added. This is similar to what we have for our whole universe, where there's no energy being supplied to it and no energy leaving it. All right? The first law of thermodynamics. Why am I talking about that? Those verses that we read are true. I believe them. But if you were to talk or witness to an atheist, reading those scriptures to them is going to do nothing. Why? Well, first of all, they don't believe there's a God, and they don't believe that the Bible is anything like the Word of God. It's just a bunch of words that men have written down. And I can't get this thing. There we go. What I'm going to be talking about is part of a presentation I've done at a youth conference at our Bible college. And I have a burden, I guess, for young people that are growing up in a world where everything being thrown at them, especially in the education area of their lives, is atheistic. So there are two main things that I see that lead young people to leave their faith. The first one is a strong one. It's lust. Sexual immorality will lead a lot of kids astray. And we live in a world where it's okay to live together. And where that leads, it's okay to date and go to bed with someone. That kind of thinking leads a lot of people to just leave the church. But then there's that second one. The kind of friends you mix with, the stuff you read on social media, movies, etc. Most of all, the most powerful influence are the universities, where you'll have professors who have their PhDs, and maybe several of them, and they will stand up and say, there is no God, and there's no evidence for God. What I want to present to you, that there is more evidence for the existence of God than that there's no God. It takes more faith to believe in a system without God than to just have simple faith and say that there is an intelligent designer, and we call him God. All right? So if some of the things I'm going to say this morning might be a little bit over your head, just remember, I'm aiming this at kids who are learning some quite technical things philosophically and otherwise that are coming from an atheistic perspective. All right? I want to present I'm going to call it the classical argument for the beginning of the universe, the cosmological evidence. Cosmology is the study of the origin and structure of the universe. Thus, the cosmological argument seeks to provide or examine those arguments that are related to the beginning of things. So here's the all-important question. How did everything come into existence? Or I think it was Thomas Aquinas that said, why is there something rather than nothing? Or is that Leibniz that said that? Why is there something rather than nothing? Well, evolutionary science denies the existence of a supernatural creator and has said in the past, whatever exists has always existed. Whatever exists has always existed. Based on the first law of thermodynamics, energy can neither be created nor destroyed, which is what I was, in a way, trying to present to you, some of these ideas based on the illustration of the cup of coffee. Norman Geisler, Christian apologist, has said, maybe we should restate this law. The actual amount of energy in the universe remains constant. There was a video series out quite a while ago, and when I was a kid in the schools, I saw this video, but most of what I saw went way over my head. The only thing we were concerned about was, yay, we get to watch a movie in school. Carl Sagan, his series, and he's an astrophysicist who wrote from an atheistic perspective, the cosmos is all that is, or ever was, or ever will be. And we're watching this with the Truth Project, and they're mentioning this, and he just babbles on and on and on about we as human beings, we have fallen from great heights, and we are made of star stuff. Wow. So we have this idea, can you even think of infinity? Infinity means there's no beginning and there's no ending. This has been called the steady state theory. To infinity and beyond. To quote, what's his name? Buzz Lightyear from Toy Story. Can you see that? It's a little bit too small. Just thought I'd throw that in. Scientists have since discovered that our universe is ever expanding. And number two, it will eventually experience a heat death. According to the second law of thermodynamics, energy, in a closed system will tend to disorder increasingly until it reaches equilibrium. So just like the cream in the coffee, it will eventually cool down, and that's what's happening in our universe. It's expanding, and all the energy, the heat, will eventually start to go to equilibrium, cool off. And when that happens, none of us will be here. So scientists, instead of looking for an absolute beginning, they theorize cycles of growth and death. So maybe we're in this, we're in the growth period, but we're going to be going to death, and then it'll spring up again. It'll just, from the infinity past to the infinite future. Or maybe it started with smaller cycles of growth and death and going to increasingly bigger cycles of death. But this is just to get away from the fact that there is a finite beginning to the universe. More recently, the scientists have she's all excited about this. Scientists have to admit that the universe had a beginning. And it has been named the Big Bang. I think some people misunderstand what that really means, but there's this idea that if we go back in time, the universe got smaller and smaller and smaller to a very, 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 very small point in space and time. This can be diagrammed, and this is from William Lane Craig's book, The Conical Representation of the Standard Model. Space and time began at the initial cosmological singularity, before which literally nothing exists. Now, how many of you have been in a deep, dark cave somewhere where there's no light? Yeah, we watched a video on the Carlsbad Caverns, and someday we want to go down there and see that big cave and stuff. It's really dark, isn't it? But that is not nothing. You're still in an atmosphere. For us to imagine nothing, I mean nothing. No air molecules, no vacuum, no time, and no space, no material thing. There's nothing. And this is what even secular scientists are saying. Before this point of expansion, there was nothing. Aha. Think of creation out of nothing from Scripture. You see, true science actually backs up what Scripture teaches. But I want you to understand that the Bible is not a scientific textbook, right? So the Bible won't explain in detail how God made things. It just presents the fact that God made. Out of, and especially creating out of nothing. And at other times in Genesis, it says that he said, and these things happened. They grew, like the plants and the trees, etc., out of something. We may logically assume this fact, as believers, of the origin of our universe as a starting point to show that God was necessary for this event. For example, William Lane Craig says we can demonstrate that the universe must have a cause using Al-Ghazali's Kalam argument, which logically states, if you don't know who Al-Ghazali is, he was a medieval Muslim theologian who thought of this to refute the ancient Greek philosophers who were teaching that the universe has always been. Even the Muslims believed, like we do, we have a monotheistic worldview, which means that God created. Now, we already talked about world religions, so Al-Ghazali was on for a different purpose. He was talking about this. But I want you to see the argument here. It's very simple. If you can only remember these things for an argument, it should present some good evidence. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. Another way of saying this, anything that is in motion has a cause to its motion. Anything. All right? Second point, the universe began to exist. This is undeniable now, although there are some scientists that are still trying to, defend the infinity or the infinite universe. All right, and thirdly, the universe has a cause. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. Thus, the universe has a cause. You can't get from nothing, nothing, nothing to boom, there's something. Do we ever see that happening in our world? Where something comes out of nothing? Scientists have tried to make experiments to show that, something happened. Like that joke where you have this contest between God and the atheist scientist? Okay, let's see who can create. Who can create the better object. And so, okay, scientists, go ahead, you start. And he says, okay, I'll take this lump of dirt, and God says, whoa, wait. No, you can't start with anything. Well, of course, the scientists can't. Scientists have taken material of some kind of soil, I don't know what it was, put it in a test tube and subject lightning or electricity to it to see if it would spontaneously generate some life form in it. And ultimately that experiment failed because we can't do that. We can't replicate that. And even if they could, we're talking about the difference between no life, nothing, to something. All right, so write these 3 points down, or if not, look up the Kalam cosmological argument. And I highly recommend, for those of you that are really interested in this kind of thing, to look up Reasonable Faith online. William Lane Craig is doing an excellent job debating atheists all the time, and written several books and has YouTube videos explaining some of these theories and evidences that he uses. Now, some may counter-argue with, like Calvin and Hobbes. His, that's Mo. Yeah, I guess he's an enemy there. Physics gives examples of things coming from nothing. Vacuum is not nothing, he says. So our answer would be, otherwise anything and everything could come from nothing. And we just don't see this happening. Our observation of things in the world verifies this truth. Right. They also may counter-argue with, the universe caused itself. It didn't need a creator. Well, then the universe would had to have had existed before it came into being, which is absurd. We answer, there we go. There had to have been an uncaused personal cause that is timeless, spaceless, immaterial, and powerful to start the universe. Now here is where, oh, we actually have time for this, but maybe I'll just go on. I didn't think I would get to there is a video that I'd like to present at this point. You have it there?
No, I can get it up.
Maybe just get it going there. I'll keep going until you have it. So maybe we'll watch that debate there. It's kind of a Q&A time at the end of a debate between Dr. Frank Turek and the atheist Christopher Hitchens, who is now dead. Christopher Hitchens is well known for his stance and for his, I'm going to say he was very antagonistic against Christians. But it's always helpful to watch these videos to see where they're coming from. Let me walk through this, and I've shown this before. The most effective and practical apologetic, for the most part, if we don't have this ongoing personal relationship with God, doing apologetics really doesn't have any substance to it. It's just kind of hollow. That we love God with all of our being, including our minds. We learn to know God through prayer, study of His Word, and meaningful reflection. And of course, our relationship with others. If you're not loving your neighbor as yourself, blessing those who hate you, that's a tough one. And when you get teased at work or whatever people may do to you because they don't like the stance that you have as a Christian, we are called to bless those who hate us, to pray for them. And if we're not in loving unity with the body of believers, again, we're missing something. William Craig said, more often than not, it is who you are rather than what you say that will bring an unbeliever to Christ. You got it there? We'll see if this is pretty good if we can get the video going. How many of you are lost? You're lost at what I'm talking about here. It's on? Go ahead. Yeah, let's play it. Let's watch this. answers or dodges to the answers? What is his response to the question, how did we get something from nothing? Say it again. I don't need to know that. You need to know that. Well, you're not answering the question. None of them will want to answer the question. There's another video I have. I should probably show some clips from that. Expelled, No Intelligence Allowed by Ben Stein, where he does an interview of scientists and asking this question. What do you think caused the Big Bang? All kinds of interesting theories, including the one that maybe some aliens seeded this planet or this universe from a different source. Aliens, woo, came here, dropped off something and left. They would rather believe that than that there's a supernatural God designer who started the whole thing. There's something else right at the end that they're getting really heated in the debate, and I show this sometimes as an example of how not to do apologetics, because Frank Turek, and I'm guilty of this myself, I get a little heated myself emotionally, and when you lose your cool, you're losing the argument, because we're not in an emotional argument here. We're presenting evidence calmly, coolly, and collectedly. This is the evidence for God. You don't have to get excited about it, and the more you understand, the more it's like they are the ones that they're going to get upset about it. But that doesn't mean that we should get upset. What was the other thing? Oh, so the thing that the atheists will almost always bring against us will be, well, I wouldn't want to believe in a God because of all the bad things that are happening in the world. It's the problem of evil. Theodicy, it's called in theological terms. Theodicy. And that is a real problem for us as Christians to try and answer apologetically. How do we answer that? And you know what? Again, we have better answers for that question than atheists do. And I'm not going to talk about that now. That's another can of worms that I'll open up in the future. But any other comments? Anything you noticed? Yeah.
Well, there was a number of misrepresentations theologically. His comment that God created man with original sin.
Yeah, he doesn't know. He doesn't know his theology, but yeah.
That. So, but what that stirs within me, and it's become very apparent in the last little bit, is if we ourselves have criticisms with something people say or do, we better have a right criticism, not misrepresent what is said and done.
Very good point.
Your own argument breaks down if you misrepresent what they are saying.
That's very good. Yes.
So that's functionally for him. That it's like, but I mean, for him, his point isn't really to it. His point is to get into an argument.
Yeah.
Which is what he functionally did with Frank Turek.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's not what we're looking to get into, is to get into an argument.
Right.
Right. So that was just. I mean, there's a few points that I had, but I was just one that I just kind of wanted to put out there. So.
Oh, that's very good. Very good. Many things we can.
The atheist was talking over. He wasn't allowing him to speak.
Okay. So kind of bullying his ideas into the mix. Yeah. Go ahead.
I noticed the way their body language, Frank, I guess it was, he was engaged, whereas the atheist was sitting back, like, not, his manner was condescending, like, he was not going
Right.
to, it was a waste of time kind of thing.
Right.
Like, just their body language was so opposite, you know?
Right. This may have been in a quote-unquote Christian assembly or something, because Christopher Hitchens asked the question, do you all believe? And so it may have been in a big church or a Christian college somewhere where they had this debate. So Hitchens is knowingly going into a place where they're going to be against his ideas. And so he's probably sitting there defensively. But I want to get more at what are the excuses that they have? And it's always this idea, well, I don't need to believe what you're throwing at me. The big thing that Christopher Hitchens will say over and over, that there's no evidence. And other famous atheists have said that before too. Bertrand Russell is famous for the comment that somebody had asked him, so what are you going to say if one day you die and you find yourself standing before the great judge, God, and God's going to ask you, why didn't you believe in my son Jesus? And his answer was, no evidence, God, or not enough evidence, God. And that's unfortunate, because I think they haven't seriously looked at the evidence that's there. And if we do more research into this, this divide. And by the way, we are theists, meaning we believe that there's a God. And when we're doing apologetics, that's our primary focus against atheists who say there is no God. Any other comments?
I don't want to dominate this, but
Oh, Scott was
there
going
was
to.
a hand up there too, sorry.
Yeah, Scott.
The Bible says that God put eternity into the hearts of man. And I wonder if, do atheists really not believe in God? Or is the idea of being subject to him so repulsive to them that they would rather create this space where there is no God? I was reading in Luke 20 when the Pharisees come to Jesus. He's teaching in the temple every day, and they said, "Whose authority are you doing this from? Where are you getting your authority?" And he tells this parable about the owner of a vineyard renting it out to tenants. And of course, when the owner is trying to collect, the tenants are mistreating the servants coming to collect. And then the owner decides to send his son. And the tenants say to themselves, "This is the heir. Let's kill him and we'll have everything for ourselves." And so Jesus was basically saying to them, "You know very well who I am. You know very well whose authority I am acting with."
Yeah.
And I think for all non-believers, it's more a case of rebellion.
I think you're right there. Yeah. Pastor Earl, and then we'll have to shut it down.
So, addressing the comment that Christopher Hitchens says, it falls on you to prove that God exists. So we understand that there's a level of faith that we have to step into for God, always existed. The other part of that argument is you can turn that and say, well, it also falls on you to prove that something came from nothing.
Exactly. Yeah.
We all start from a place of we can't answer the full question
Yeah.
because it's beyond what we comprehend, which, he admitted that. So if you come from that, then you start saying, so let's build it from here. So predominantly over the course of written human history, quote unquote, there's been, till basically Darwin, there's been an understanding that there's a cause for our creation.
Yeah.
So if it falls on anyone to disprove that, it's somebody that has now come up with a new theory
Yeah.
and they can't prove
Right.
that,
Right.
right? So
Okay.
just some thoughts to come.
Yeah. Very good. We'll have to cut it off there, but there you go. Thank you. You are dismissed.